In the previous video, Hari ended up with a bruise on her eye. Now, will this lead President Kang to recognize her at work? We'll find out soon, as unfortunately, when Hari was getting on the elevator at her company, Tae-moo appeared to use it as well. Startled by the man right in front of her, she accidentally dropped her bandage. However, she managed to pick it up before President Kang could recognize her. Upon hearing that he would be attending the tasting event, which she had included Min Woo in, she made an excuse to her team about having a stomach issue and hid in the bathroom. Despite her efforts, Hari's presence was mentioned at the event, as everyone credited the dish Tae-moo liked the most, which Min Woo prepared, to the protagonist's idea. Once again, her attempt to avoid being recognized by her boss failed. That evening, Hari went out for dinner with Min Woo to celebrate the success of his dish. Since Young Seo was running late, Min Woo took the opportunity to ask Hari about the concert tickets he had given her. He was surprised to learn that she had taken a guy instead of her best friend, especially since she hadn't mentioned it. Luckily, Young Seo's delay allowed her to spot President Kang entering the restaurant. She tried to call Hari to warn her, but by then, Hari had already noticed him and his secretary, allowing her to slip away unnoticed. Min Woo mentioned to Tae-moo that Hari was at the restaurant, prompting the chef to call her to find out where she had gone. Hari made up an excuse that Min Woo believed. However, because of the call, President Kang recognized the ringtone Hari had set, which was the same song his fake girlfriend cried to at the concert they attended together. In the next scene, we see the two friends together, and Young Seo tells Hari that the president's secretary is her neighbor. This means they can't meet at her place with Hari dressed normally, to avoid suspicion from Tae-moo. Throughout the conversation, Young Seo begins to suspect that her friend is slowly falling for President Kang. Back at Min Woo's restaurant, Tae-moo questions the chef and learns that he and Hari have known each other for 7 years, the same duration his fake girlfriend mentioned about overcoming a friend. The next day, Tae-moo's grandfather discovered that his grandson and his girlfriend would celebrate 1 year together over the weekend. Wanting him to marry soon, he insisted on a celebration and made a reservation at a restaurant for them. Despite Tae-moo's busy schedule, his secretary expected him to be annoyed by the changes. However, Tae-moo seemed pleased to meet his fake girlfriend. Meanwhile, Hari went on a trip with her office colleagues to shoot a commercial for the company. Tae-moo's grandfather showed up to check on his employees' progress. Hari tried her best to avoid him, but at one point, he found her phone, which had been left ringing on a bench. Hari had to retrieve it, hiding her face with her hair to avoid recognition, and grabbed the phone without saying thank you. Meanwhile, President Kang realized that his fake girlfriend's ringtone was the same as the one that played when Min Woo called Hari, leading him to think the song was popular. Back to Hari, she answered the call in the only bathroom available, and Tae-moo arranged a meeting for the weekend. During this time, Tae-moo's grandfather began feeling unwell, so he headed to the bathroom, which was occupied by Hari. Realizing who wanted to use it, Hari went back inside, forcing the elderly man to use all his strength to open the door, only to fall into a nearby water basin. As a result, the grandfather had to leave the location with a bit of aversion towards Hari. In the next scene, we see Young Seo making friends with another neighbor who accidentally received her mail. Despite this new man in her life, she couldn't stop thinking about Sung-hoon. We then see Tae-moo accompanying his grandfather to a clinic for a checkup after the fall. President Kang left with a tonic his grandfather had made for his fake girlfriend, so he went directly to meet Hari. In addition to the tonic, Tae-moo gave her an ointment for the bruise on her eye, possibly indicating his growing feelings for her. However, Hari made a misstep by asking if his grandfather was badly hurt, as President Kang hadn't mentioned the incident to her. Nevertheless, he didn't pay much attention to it. In the following scene, we see the two on their weekend date, supposedly celebrating their 1-year anniversary. The day turned out to be quite pleasant, and they seemed to grow closer. Of course, The money added a touch of charm, as President Kang took her to an expensive lunch, followed by shopping at a luxury store for Hari, and ending the day watching fireworks together. Meanwhile, young Seo went to the gym, where Sung-hoon and her recently befriended neighbor were also present. The friendly neighbor even helped her with her workout, and despite claiming he felt nothing for her, Sung-hoon kept a close eye on them. In the locker room, something left Sung-hoon intrigued. He, like the neighbor, wore glasses, but when asked for the time, the neighbor easily read the clock on the wall without his glasses, whereas Sung-hoon couldn't see much beyond the man's face. This led the secretary to question why the neighbor wore glasses if he seemingly didn't need them. The scene cuts to the neighbor giving young Seo a gift, a lamp he made for her, suggesting she put it in her bedroom as it suited the environment. This struck me as odd, setting off my strange situation radar. Returning to the protagonist, upon arriving home and storing the gift from her fake boyfriend, Hari discovered that the photo they took together at the restaurant was included in the gift bag, and she was thrilled to have this keepsake. However, as good things are short-lived, she accidentally left her wallet in President Kang's vehicle. When he returned to her address to return it, he noticed Min-woo calling her Hari in front of her family's establishment. Tae-moo decided to check her ID in the wallet, discovering her secret. In the end, President Kang didn't return the wallet to Hari and simply left it in front of the restaurant, where her brother fortunately found it. At home, Tae-moo began to realize all the clues the protagonist had given that he could have noticed earlier, indicating she wasn't who she claimed to be and explaining why Hari always hid her face. From that moment, President Kang was determined to spend his time making the protagonist's life difficult until she realized he knew her secret. This meant that in the coming days, Hari would be very tired in both her professional and personal life. At one point, the secretary even spoke to Tae-moo about how he had been treating the protagonist, leading Tae-moo to reveal Hari's secret to him, leaving the secretary in shock. President Kang bothered Hari so much that when she was dressed as his girlfriend, he invited her to a company ceremony. When she was his employee, he informed her she would receive an award as a standout in her area, which would be presented on the ceremony day. He did this to see how she would handle the situation or which persona she would choose to attend as. Either way, if she didn't attend as his girlfriend, there was a hefty penalty for breaching the contract. If she didn't attend to receive the award, it would seem strange, as it's something no one would miss. It's a complicated situation for our Hari. However, things weren't easy for young Seo either. When she tried to be nice to Sung-hoon, he drew an imaginary line and asked her not to cross it. President Kang ended up being in the building at the same time as Hari, although each was at their friend's place. During a conversation between the secretary and Tae-moo, Sung-hoon mentioned that the protagonist might have lied out of fear of telling the truth and being fired from the company. Therefore, the secretary believed it was time for him to forgive her, as Hari was an excellent employee. The next day, we see the protagonist removing the gift young Seo received from the neighbor and placing it in her friend's living room as decoration. Returning to President Kang's plan, to ensure the protagonist attended the ceremony, he sent flowers to her family's home, inviting everyone to the event. Now Hari couldn't pretend to be sick or anything like that to avoid going. With the situation becoming complicated for the protagonist, she ended up drinking a bit too much when dining with her colleagues. This resulted in her calling President Kang while drunk. However, during their conversation, something seemed to happen to Hari. When she stopped answering Tae-moo's calls, he decided to find her to ensure she was okay. He found the protagonist sleeping on a slide in a children's playground. She was so out of it that she thought President Kang wasn't really there and that it was a dream. This led Hari to reveal her secret and apologize for lying. Hearing her brother calling her in the background, Tae-moo decided to leave her there and hide, so she would think it was a dream. The next day, when Hari woke up, she found a note that eased her worries. President Kang had written a message telling her she no longer needed to continue the charade of being his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Taemu went on a last-minute business trip, thinking he had no feelings for the protagonist. He believed that seeing her for so long had caused this strange feeling, and some time away would do him good. However, President Kang found himself thinking about Hari the entire time he was away. Apparently, he forgot to inform his grandfather that he had ended the relationship, as the elder called the protagonist to invite her to dinner. Not wanting to cause trouble for Taemu, she accepted. Later, we see young Seo at home, accidentally breaking the gift she received from the neighbor. When this happened, she discovered a hidden camera in the lamp. Frightened, young Seo gathered all the evidence to take to the police. However, while waiting for a taxi, the neighbor came down to the front of the building and picked up the bag she had dropped in her haste. He said he would keep the gift to fix it. At that moment, the secretary arrived, immediately sensing something was wrong. When he approached them, the neighbor fled with the bag. Sung-hoon chased after him, but the neighbor disposed of the hidden camera along the way. Although he managed to apprehend the neighbor, the crucial evidence was missing. At the police station, the secretary received a call from Taemu, inviting him to dinner with his grandfather. Sung-hoon explained where he was and what had happened. When the protagonist arrived, Taemu forgot any resentment he felt and told her to get in the car, informing her about what had happened to her best friend. President Kang called Hari by her name, and she realized he knew her secret. However, there were more pressing matters that needed attention. At the police station, the two friends watched the footage the man had recorded of them. Fortunately, it wasn't anything too serious, thanks to the protagonist placing the object in the living room. Despite the concerning situation, the neighbor would only receive a fine, as the law wasn't as strict as it should be in these cases. At home, after things had calmed down, Hari began to realize her life had been chaotic in recent days because Taemu knew the truth about her. Meanwhile, Taemu pursued the neighbor and decided to investigate further to see if there were more grounds to keep him in custody. It turned out the situation was much more significant than Taemu had imagined. First, he bought the company the neighbor worked for, then decided to fire him for filming women without their consent. He also planned to file a lawsuit against him, supporting each victim in pressing charges, and wouldn't stop until the man was behind bars. Through this ordeal, President Kang realized he had feelings for her, so he decided to ask her to meet after work and planned to propose to her, with a future leading to marriage. His secretary even tried to convince him to take it slow to see if she felt the same way, but Taemu didn't listen. Regardless, President Kang's plan didn't go as intended. During dinner, the protagonist prepared a presentation showing how she was a valuable employee and tried to convince him not to fire her. The mood was completely disrupted, and Taemu didn't bring up the topic of dating. The next day, President Kang talked to Sung-hoon about his frustration that she didn't see him as a romantic interest. The secretary suggested she might still be interested in Min-woo, meaning Taemu would have to win her over. Meanwhile, young Seo and the protagonist celebrated with their friends when Min-woo appeared on TV. At the gathering, Ura started picking on Hari after hearing her friends comment that they thought Min-woo would never get back with her and would end up dating the protagonist. To protect her friend, young Seo mentioned how Hari's new boyfriend was tall, handsome, and rich. However, Ura thought she was lying and even commented that the protagonist's standards were too high and that she should lower them. I believe what made Ura insecure was seeing Min-woo a bit upset when he heard Hari was dating, even though it was a lie. Later, we see that young Seo was traumatized by being filmed without her knowledge, so she avoided certain things, like not using restrooms in restaurants, at work, etc. The next day, President Kang began executing his plan to win over the protagonist. He arranged for her to stay at the company, but she would have to help develop a new product, working after hours. In reality, Taemu rented a cinema room just for the two of them, using the excuse that the movie was related to what they would be developing. However, things didn't go as planned. The protagonist's team leader was also at the cinema with another colleague, and they ended up watching the movie with her. President Kang discreetly left the room to avoid being seen, as it would have been embarrassing to explain why he was alone in a cinema with Hari, especially since they weren't in a romantic relationship. Meanwhile, Young Seo was waiting at the bus stop with a full bladder. Sung-hoon passed by and offered her a ride. However, after spending some time in traffic, Young Seo had to get out of the vehicle, as she was about to relieve herself right there. She ran into an establishment, but when she tried to open the restroom doors, they were locked. The secretary, not understanding what was happening, parked the car and followed Young Seo. Seeing her in distress, he forced the bathroom door open so she could relieve herself. The next day, President Kang looked for an excuse to spend more time with the protagonist and invented a business trip. Taemu researched Hari's likes on social media and planned every moment, but he didn't boast about it, acting as if everything was a coincidence to maintain the magic of the moment. At one point, they seemed to connect, and the protagonist shared her dream of creating a brand to sell tasty frozen foods. Since her parents always worked hard, frozen meals were her favorite way to satisfy her hunger, and she wanted to offer that to others, as not everyone can eat at restaurants daily. Meanwhile, Young Seo was drinking alone at a restaurant when Sung-hoon arrived and sat beside her. Despite their ongoing story of not crossing each other's line, he was concerned about her drinking. Later, when she was leaving, the secretary followed her home. Unable to hold her tongue after drinking too much, Young Seo confessed her feelings for him, leading to the couple's first kiss. Returning to the protagonist, a situation arose with her and Taemu. We already know the man hates rainy days, and unfortunately, on the way back, they encountered several storm clouds, causing the light in his face to disappear. President Kang pulled over and asked Hari to get out, leaving her in the rain and in the middle of nowhere, with walking as her only option to reach a place, as her phone was also out of battery. He did this so she wouldn't witness him having an anxiety attack triggered by rainy days, related to his parents' accident. Once the rain passed, he calmed down, but the protagonist was no longer where he had left her, and now President Kang was desperate to find her. Hari managed to reach a hotel, where she was allowed to dry off and charge her phone. At the reception, she encountered her friends, or rather supposed friends, as they seemed like snakes. The trio started picking on Hari, asking if she was there with her supposed rich boyfriend and wanting to see him to know if he was real. Embarrassed and wanting to go home, the protagonist was about to speak when President Kang interrupted. He appeared out of nowhere, calling her love, and then introduced himself to the trio of women as Hari's boyfriend. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, please like and share it to help me out. See you next time.